Hello and welcome back to FiddleUP. I am Emerald Ray and this is the Cold Rain and Snow. And I just call it Rain and Snow, try to keep it simple, but it is a classic bluegrass song about a guy who is tired of his wife. There's a lot of songs like that. And so this is one of them. And, you know, it's just such a fun song to sing. You can really get into the belty stuff, which I love to do. So what I'm doing is kind of a weird thing to do to start off. If you have been watching any of my other videos, you might have noticed I've switched to my G fiddle. So this fiddle is in GD. But I was not playing in G. What was I? So I was doing that for sneaky reasons. So you might want to take your fiddle and put it into this tuning because it won't work otherwise. So I have a fiddle in G, but like I said, I don't always play it in G. I actually just use it so I can get other first position chord options, exactly like what I'm going to show you now. So if you are in this tuning now, we're going to be talking about this in A, and I'm gonna try to just talk about the finger positions on the top strings because it does actually get confusing considering we're thinking about this as being an A. So bear with me here. So the first part. So this is just kind of a weird kind of grungy intro. I like it because it's ferocious and it just kind of gets the whole song started. There's a lot of versions of the song that are kind of slow and mellow, and I really wanted to just get the angst out of this song. So I really wanted to start off with a blast of just really growly what's going on with the fiddle behavior down here. So I have an A and E covered on the bottom with my first string. And if you notice, I have a G on the top, which gives me this really nice A minor 7th chord. So So I'm catching that weird ninth at the top there. And so that's a second finger on what used to be the A string and now the top G string. So I don't know if you can say, it might actually be useful, even though you're well past that point, to look at the fingerboard. So we have A and E on the bottom, and then the open G. And then I'm adding that B with the second finger. And then I'm letting it go entirely to do an open G. And then adding an A with a little warble there. So it sounds like this. Notice I'm varying which strings I'm doing certain rhythms on, and that is on purpose, actually. Don't think about it too much. Something that I have found with doing all these rhythms is it's better to have your bow arm be loose and not get locked into any specific patterns. For instance, I could go... and it, like, really stick to that. But if you just kind of blur through it, all of a sudden it sounds like really alive and really organic, and just doesn't feel like it's too repetitive. And then we go into the chopping bit. So that's a long explanation for that intro, but it is kind of a weird thing to do. So we're gonna start. So this is down to an A and an E on the bottom. And then I'm adding the G there to get the nice seventh. And it kind of rings with that top G string too. And kind of gives it an extra emphasis. And then I'm heading down to the F sharp there. And I'm kind of pulling off those fingers there. So that was a C and an E. And down to open G. So I do that a couple of times. And I'm catching that top G string there. And then I go into the first verse. Well, I married me a wife. She gave me trouble all my life. She let me out in the rain and the snow. So that is the first verse there. I married me a wife. She gave me trouble all my life. She left me out in the rain and snow. So, and I'm just kind of, trying to work with that rhythm a little bit, but have it follow the melody a little bit. Well, I married me a wife. So then heading to the F sharp there. Gave me trouble all my life. You see how I'm kind of playing around with, and you could just stay with the A too. You can just, you can actually, because you already have a G on the top, which you're going to hit accidentally. You don't have to do all this stuff. It's kind of overkill. Yeah, so I just kind of play around with all that. You don't have to do anything terribly specific. Well, I married me a wife. She gave me trouble all my life. She loved me. And then we're going to go to the C chord here, C and E. Out in the, and then G, rain, and to the A, snow. And then from there we go into the first chorus. Rain and snow, snow, oh, oh, that is C, slow, so we have C, G, A, and then that F sharp to give us a D chord. And then the last line is, she left me out in the rain and the snow. So that is just A and open G and A. I'm just hitting that 7th on the D string there. So yeah, so that's the whole first thing. So let's try that whole thing together. Well, married me a wife. She gave me trouble all my life. She left me out in the rain and the snow. Rain and snow. She left me out in the rain and the snow. Well, and then we're going to go into the next verse, which is, well, she came down the stairs with her long golden hair, and her cheeks were as red as a rose, as a rose. Her cheeks were as red as a rose. So we're doing exactly the same thing, but with slightly different accompaniment there. So it's just, well, she came down the stairs with her long yellow hair, and her cheeks were as red as a rose, as a rose, as a rose, as a rose. Her cheeks were as red as a rose, blah, blah, blah. So we're doing the same chop as we did on verse 1. Well, she came down the stairs with her long golden hair, and her cheeks were as red as a rose. And then I like to mix it up here by going back to a full-on, really heavy drone. As a rose, and really giving that some flavor there. And that is just to mix things up. Like I've been saying, you wanna, I chopped the first chorus, so I want to mix it up this time, and that's a good way to do it. And because I'm going to go into a fiddle solo next, I wanted to kind of just grab some attention. Plus, there's something about that drony quality that fits that line, as a rose. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's all kind of, intuitive. So we have the as a rose. Those are exactly the same chords. Her cheeks were as red as a rose. So that's just me getting up to the top and getting into the. So that is all fair. It was improvised at some point, and then it actually settled into a set solo that I always kind of do basically the same thing. So it sounds improvised, but actually isn't. And that actually happens a lot with solos. This one, for some reason, I know I've talked before about basing the solos off of the melody, and this one is a little bit more vaguely based on the melody, but it's still kind of the same idea. But this one, for some reason, felt like it had a little bit more room to go crazy and go a little off onto a separate trail for a minute. So yeah, you could copy my solo, but I would highly recommend coming up with your own solo. One thing that I like doing is using some shifting at the bottom. So just that actually is following the melody pretty much exactly. And then I go into And that's exactly like the intro in the beginning. So I like to kind of harken back to that first intro. It also gives the ear a minute to wind down out of the fiddle solo and get back into what's going on with the song. It also really helps get into the third verse, because I actually like to start that with some bowing rhythms. Well, I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you, 'cause I ain't gonna be treated this way. This way, hey, I ain't gonna be treated this way. So yeah, there's a lot going on there with the fiddle accompaniment, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you do all that. That is something that I fell into over time. It actually feels like when I just played it there, it sounds completely disjointed, but it somehow kind of works. You know, these verses are very repetitive, even though the words are changing. You know, the feel is switching back and forth all the time. But it kind of, you know, you have the rhythms. I really wanted to accentuate that. Well, I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you. And so, because that is just such a long word, it just felt like it needed something. And so often when I'm putting these arrangements together, I'm very informed by the song itself, and I try to follow it along. And you will notice as you get into Fiddle-Singing, it's almost kind of impossible not to do that. It's actually really weird to do two totally separate different things. So as I was developing my Fiddle-Singing style, it sounds a lot more intricate than it is, because I'm actually just following the song. So if you're ever wondering why I made a decision, it's probably just because it felt more natural to follow the actual song than it did stick with the accompaniment and have the song be like sitting on top separately from it. So let's try to break down this third verse so you can see what's going on. Well, I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you, 'cause I ain't. And I switched back to chopping there just because I felt like I needed some space. I switched back to chopping when I'm feeling like the rhythms are too intense. So we've done all three things in one tiny little line. I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you. So that's like 3 different types of accompaniment, but it works somehow, and you know, kind of gets it all ready for chopping through this next verse so that we can go back to the intensive rhythms on the last verse. So I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you. I ain't gonna be treated this way, this way, this way, this way. So I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you, 'cause I ain't gonna be treated this way. This way, I ain't gonna be treated this way. Wish you came to the room, wish you never fade alone. So the way I kind of got into that was by starting a little bit early, and I actually do that a lot, where I start the next accompaniment piece a little bit early to get into it. So this is a really weird pattern. I'm intentionally not letting it be any one thing, and I'm really accentuating the triplets: 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and making it sound a little bit polyrhythmic. So when I don't know what I can do to try to get along with you, 'cause I ain't gonna be treated this way. This way, I ain't this way. Well, she came to the room where she met her fatal doom, and I ain't gonna be treated this way. This way, hey, hey, hey. I ain't gonna be treated this way. I ain't gonna be treated this way. So as you can see, you know, there's all these things that you can do. She came into the room to meet her fatal doom, and I ain't gonna be treated this way. So, sorry, let's back up a little bit. My brain rewinded a little bit too far that time. It's hard to keep all this stuff straight. There's actually a lot going on in this song. And I've done this one so many times that I'm able to be more improvisational with it, and I'm sort of psyching myself out. So, sorry about that. She came into the room. She came into the room where she met her fatal doom. And I ain't gonna be treated this way. So yeah, it's very similar to verse 3. So even I'm getting confused here. So she came into the room to where she met her fatal doom. Yikes. So and then you're going through going through your bowing rhythms there. This way, hey, hey, hey. I ain't gonna be treated this way. I ain't gonna be treated this way. So yeah, you know, that's kind of a sort of a classic ending. I'm kind of going back to the same chords we were using in the intro, just to do a little harkening back to that intro. And that is that. That is what I do on the rain and snow, or the cold rain and snow. And this is a very classic song. I highly recommend you learn it at some point in your life. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found all this helpful. And I hope you incorporate some, if not all, of these ideas into your own arrangement. And I will see you in the next video.